In the past, we've used other bracketologies from, CBS, ESPN, that sort of thing, and we finally decided that all of those are just super inaccurate. I don't feel like they follow the rules of making the bracket well enough, so we decided to make our own. And today we're going to go ahead and go through that a little bit, as well as predict just a rough estimate of who can end up winning the national championship based on this bracket. Some of the biggest things to note, first of all, a lot of brackets have teams like, Auburn in there as a 9 seed. We don't have Auburn in the tournament at all. I think Auburn has been playing really bad as of late, and does not deserve to be in as of now. The general seeds don't typically differ more than 1 to 2, but we really focused on their resume, and tried to reward teams for, how well they've been playing recently, but still looking at that whole season as far as putting them into the bracket. And then the other big thing to note, I think, is that we did have to punish Texas Tech a little bit. It's not their fault, but JT Toppin tearing his ACL has been a big loss for them, and they haven't been playing as well as of late. Now, obviously, if they figure things out, they can move back up a little bit, but they're going to be a 6 seed for now. So we'll go ahead and take a look at our first four. And we have Miami, Ohio in the first four, and that's because we don't have them winning the MAC. We have Akron as the MAC champions. I believe they're in 11 seed as well. But yeah, Miami, Ohio, and Missouri here to kick off the first four.
And I feel like if Miami doesn't win the MAC, I don't see them even really standing a chance to win any sort of game, even if they make the tournament. I think Missouri has shown that they can be a pretty solid team. I keep going back and forth because Miami just has that magic for the reason why they're undefeated still at this point in the season, despite so many close wins. But I think Missouri is the far and away better team.
I agree with you. Missouri's been playing really well as of late. They had that loss to Arkansas this past weekend, but overall, still a really good team. I think they'd be able to beat Miami. It doesn't really matter who wins this 16 seed. We'll go ahead and go with Tennessee State. St. Mary's in Indiana is an interesting one. St. Mary's definitely has the net ranking advantage, but as far as truly being tested, Indiana in the Big Ten has been tested a lot more. I really do think Indiana can beat a St. Mary's team like that, and then Howard and Bethune-Cookman will just take Howard. Again, it's not going to matter.
Yeah. I mean, isn't Bethune-Cookman like they're barely above 500. They're 15 and 13 right now and predicted to win their comp. Like I don't think they're gonna be that good.
Yeah. All right. So Duke and Tennessee State, Cam Boozer and the Blue Devils, and move on. That one's pretty free. Iowa and Texas. I really love this matchup. I think both of these teams, they don't have the best records, kind of middle of their conference type thing, but overall, it's a very strong net ranking. They have a good amount of quad one wins apiece, and I feel like they've both been playing well. Right now, I'm actually kind of leaning towards Texas as an upset here.
I keep going back and forth because both teams have shown like very high highs and have some really big quality wins, but they also have had some low lows, and I think Iowa's might be a little bit lower because I think they lost to Maryland just a couple of weeks ago. Granted, Texas did just lose to Georgia by 11 points, but Georgia at least is also a tournament team, so I think for right now, Texas is probably slightly better.
Yeah. Now, this 512, I do think this is an interesting 512. Last year, I think we saw one 512, I want to say last year. I don't remember exactly. I just know no top four seeds lost. But Arkansas and High Point, this is kind of a tough game for me because I do think High Point has the ability to put up a lot of points. And if we were gonna see an upset, I really feel like this could be the one we would end up having.
I would think that, but also I fell for this high point propaganda last year, and I think I picked them to beat Purdue, and Purdue ended up smoking them, and they didn't stand much of a chance. Now, granted, things can change year to year, but I do think the Razorbacks have been playing at a pretty high level as of late. I could see it. It's March, stuff happens, upsets happen all the time, and maybe we're due for a lot more upsets this year after not really having too many last year. But at least personally, I think Arkansas ends up getting the win there.
All right, we can go with Arkansas. I'm I'm just a little bit worried about finding a 5-12 later on because it really I'm not liking many of the other matchups. Kansas and Utah Valley, it's kind of similar to Arkansas and High Point. I just think Kansas is a little better than Arkansas. So I'm more confident that they can hang on in a game like that. And Kentucky and Indiana, th- I said this, I think I've said this every video. There's normally a team from the first four who ends up winning another game. And I feel like Kentucky's just had some really, really bad performances this season. A team like Indiana, they're sneaky good. They've pulled off a win against Purdue. They've got some good players. I feel like they can sneak out a win here over Kentucky.
I feel like they could too, but I'm looking ahead a little bit. I think there's a more likely first four team in that could end up getting that upset. It's the other 6 and 11, but I do kind of agree with you. I do think Indiana at times has been a pretty solid team, but it's just a matter of finding that consistency. So some of those big wins, like that overtime win over Wisconsin, I think kind of in that stretch when they did beat Purdue, there was some controversies about a foul call that probably shouldn't have been a foul, but I go back and forth. I think personally I'd pick Kentucky, but I've also picked Kentucky several times to like win a national championship or make deep runs, and they end up falling short pretty quickly. So I'm fine with leaning Indiana for right now.
Yeah, and they haven't been playing super well as of late. I think probably the biggest test for the Hoosiers is going to be that final game of the season where they go on the road to Ohio State. If they can get a win against Ohio State on the road, then I feel a lot better about them pulling off like an 11-6 upset in this scenario. Gonzaga, I think, would take care of business against Austin Peay. St. Louis and Georgia. This one's actually pretty interesting because I think obviously, Georgia's faced a lot better competition over the course of the season. St. Louis, though, they've played a few quad one and two games and they've done decently well. So I do feel like they would really, they might be underdogs, but I think they would compete here. I actually kind of want to lean St. Louis in this game.
I'm fine with that for right now too. Kind of the same thing as the Kentucky Indiana one. I might at this point in time pick Georgia, but maybe it's just me hating on St. Louis a little bit because I don't completely understand why they're still ranked in the top 25, but it's kind of that narrative that's like the Power Four teams didn't want to schedule against them because maybe they are that good and they could end up beating them. So maybe I need to watch a little bit more film on the Billikens before I completely form an opinion. But I think for the next game, though, it's going to be pretty obviously we're picking Illinois over Portland
Yeah.
State. I think the Fighting Illini have a legitimate chance at making a title run.
Yeah, what I'll say about St. Louis is they're 4-2 in quad two games with a 1 point neutral loss to Stanford, and they lost by 5 at Rhode Island. And then they have two quad one wins over Santa Clara at a neutral site and then at VCU, which are both teams that we have in our bracket here. So I think that they have some decent enough wins that I feel like they would definitely be competitive there. Iowa State and Appalachian State. It doesn't even let me pick Appalachian State, but that's fine. We didn't need to. We weren't going to. NC State and Utah State. This is another interesting one because I really like a lot of these 8-9 matchups that we ended up with in our bracket here. I think NC State, I mean, they've had some really good wins and some really bad losses. Now, Louisville's not necessarily a bad loss, but losing by 40, that makes it a little bit worse. But at the same time, a road win against Clemson is really solid. They destroyed North Carolina, although without Caleb Wilson at home. So I feel like they've been playing really well. The question is just how they're going to finish out the season. Some really tough games, including against Virginia and Duke, as two quad one games they have left. And then Utah State. I think we had San Diego State as our Mountain West champion. So Utah State's an at-large bid. They're still a really solid team. Honestly, I'm pretty 50-50 on this one. I feel like either team is good enough to win here.
I agree, and I'm probably just going to end up leaning with a team that's played some better competition throughout the year, which is going to be NC State, since the ACC is pretty loaded this year. I don't know if we counted up how many teams from each conference ended up making the tournament in our bracketology for this, but I feel like the ACC has a lot of teams that are kind of sneaky contenders that can make some deep runs or give some of the higher seeds some trouble.
Yeah, I did not end up counting it up. Um, Louisville and Belmont, I think Belmont's definitely a solid 12 seed. I really like how Louisville's been playing recently. Recently lost to North Carolina. That was a road game. We're not going to fault them too much for that. Now, Nebraska and UNC Wilmington. I might be a little bit biased because I watched UNC Wilmington throughout their conference tournament run last year, and they were a fun team to watch. They can hit threes, they can drop a lot of points. Nebraska, having never won a tournament game, I feel like they would be really upset getting a team like UNC Wilmington as their 13 seed. And I mean, I didn't get to pick my Arkansas upset earlier, so I think I have to go with UNC Wilmington to beat Nebraska now.
You know what? I'm kind of okay with it.
We'll go ahead
But
and move on.
you gotta hear me out on this next one though, because
Okay,
I'm gonna,
okay.
you know, I have a little bit of bias in this next one. But as we previously mentioned, we did pick Akron to end up being the MAC champs, and I have someone from my high school who is their leading scorer this season, Tamari Johnson, who's been absolutely insane this year, leading the Zips. And Vandy is having a great season in their own right. Don't get me wrong, and they have some really, really solid wins. But they also have struggled at times and have maybe not been at 100% at all times, including a recent loss to Mizzou on the road. Granted, it was a road game, but I don't know. I picked Akron to upset Arizona. I think it was last year in the tournament. That didn't happen. Maybe this year I can get it right. I'd like to pick the Zips here. That's just me, at least.
I was actually going to pick Akron as well, so
Let's
you didn't
go!
need to do any convincing for me there.
Rank and file
I
share a
think that
brain cell.
that actually would very likely be an 11 over 6 upset should it be a matchup. Michigan State, Hawaii, I think Sparty takes care of business there. Clemson and UCLA is interesting. Both of these teams have a losing record in quad one. The biggest thing for me here actually is the fact that Clemson's lost back-to-back quad two games now. And I'm a little bit worried about them potentially dropping on the seed lines. And I mean, this UCLA team, I wasn't super high on them until recently. That win over Illinois at home in overtime was a gutsy win. And just overall, I feel like this team is starting to play a little bit better. They've got a few tough games coming up. Quad two home game against South USC, and then three straight quad one games to end the year. If they can pick up a quad one win or two, I feel like they have a really good shot to stay in the tournament, but also maybe pick up a win over one of these seven seeds. And I feel like they could actually get it over Clemson here. This kind of is turning into our chaos region because there's always one where there's multiple upsets, and I think that this could be the region here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Clemson also has a pretty difficult end to their season. Like they might only win one of their remaining three games because they play a home game against Louisville, but then they're on the road against North Carolina and then end the season against Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech's not very good, but that's a tough end of the season. And then the ACC tournament's obviously going to be very difficult for them as well. So I think maybe momentum might play a factor there, but. As you also just did, I think UConn is pretty solid and a lot better than Merrimack, so nothing really to discuss there.
Yeah. Same thing for Arizona Howard. They'll take care of business. Miami, Texas A&M. Again, really like these 8-9 seed matchups. I think Miami's been playing really well recently. Saw him give Virginia a scare last weekend. Just overall, really liking the Canes right now. I think they're playing well, and I think that they would get a win as the 8 seed in this game over Texas A&M. BYU and Yale. I could potentially see this being a 12 over 5, but BYU recently has been playing a lot better. The win over Iowa State was huge for BYU. This game really comes down to AJ Demancia for me. If he can be their leading scorer in a first round game against a team like Yale, I think that they really should be able to win that game. We've seen Yale pull off an upset before. I just think that it's not easy as a freshman to lead your team in the NCAA tournament. If Debance is able to do that, I think they can pick up a win in the first round, though.
Yeah, I do think at the end of the day, the Cougars are a lot more solid than Yale, and it would need to be one of those tournament miracle upsets. But like you said, that win over Iowa State definitely kind of restores some of the faith I had in them for a while after, they had that little bit of a losing streak or some close wins against some of the middle of the pack teams in the Big 12. So I agree with the BYU pick here. I think North Carolina is also probably going to beat SF Austin here. I know Caleb Wilson's health is kind of up in the air, and maybe at times they have struggled without him, but they did get a pretty decent win over Louisville just yesterday. Again, I mean, it was only a 3-point win, but I mean, Louisville's a tough team, and that's going to be a dogfight. And the fact you're doing it without your star player, that just adds something to it, at least in my mind. So I still trust North Carolina in this situation. I don't think they're going to fall too early in the tournament.
Yeah, and Caleb Wilson also should be back for the tournament. There's been some rumors that he might even be able to make it back for the Duke game in the regular season. So I think North Carolina should be just fine, and we have them all the way up at a 4 seed as well. They've been playing really well even without him. Texas Tech and Missouri, you kind of hinted at this earlier, Connor, and I'm not necessarily going to disagree. I think this Missouri team, like I said earlier, they've been playing pretty well. No JT Toppin for Texas Tech. I think overall, Texas Tech is still the better team, but making it to the tournament without your best player, I think that could end up hurting them, and I feel like Missouri can pull off this upset here.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. It's going to kind of depend on how Texas Tech fares through these last couple games of the season. They have a home game against Cincinnati, who I've forgetting who they just knocked off, but they just came off of oh yeah, they just blew
Kansas.
blew out Kansas on the road, and one of I think the biggest losses at Allen Fieldhouse for the Jayhawks. So that is going to be a pretty interesting game tonight. Then you also have to go on the road against Iowa State, who hasn't lost at home, and you end your season on the road against BYU, not to mention also playing TCU. Like, if they were somehow to manage to lose like all four of those games or only get one win out of them and then have kind of a lackluster performance in the Big 12 tournament, I would easily pick Missouri to win this game. So it kind of depends on how that last stretch of the season goes. But if they do start to figure it out, then I'm probably going to revert back to what I normally thought about the Red Raiders and that I do think they are still a very capable team that can make a deep run. Maybe not winning a national championship this year without JT Toppin, but still a very solid team.
Yeah, I think Purdue takes care of business against ETSU. Villanova, San Diego State. I think it could be interesting. We had San Diego State pulling off the upset, winning the Mountain West. I really like this Villanova team, though. I mean, they lost to UConn this past weekend by 10. I think they're still playing really well, though. I want to say they're 20-5. It might be 20-6 after that game, but either way, I think Nova would win that, and then Florida takes care of business against Navy.
Yeah, I agree. Villanova is 21-6 for the record, and they do have
21.
another pretty decent game on their radar on the road against St. John's, which is really going to be their only real test for the remainder of the regular season. So I do think they are slightly better than San Diego State.
Yeah, Michigan takes care of business against Long Island. SMU and UCF, I think, could be interesting. I'm really liking SMU as of late, though. I think they could kind of sustain that late season push we've seen from UCF as they've moved their way up into the tournament. Alabama, I do believe, would take care of business against Tulsa, and then St. John's over Liberty, kind of the same thing.
Yeah, Tulsa is just going to be interesting because we do have them winning the American there, but it's kind of close considering it's weird. They have a better overall record than USF, who's currently leading the conference, but they've lost twice to USF, so we'd be expecting a little bit of an upset in their conference tournament. But I think regardless if this was USF or if it was Tulsa, I think Alabama is the better team. Tennessee, Ohio State. it's going to be so weird because Ohio State is such an anomaly of a team. They have been very competitive against a ton of great teams. There was that Virginia game a couple weeks ago. They've been somewhat competitive against some of the better Big Ten opponents like Michigan, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, Michigan
Michigan
State,
State.
but the, it just seems like it's the same thing over and over with them that they manage to lose those big games or choke away games where they have leads or when they are looking very good. And granted, Tennessee has shown that at times too, but I think it's been far less often. And I think if Ohio State were to even get into the tournament, it would be as either the last team in as an at-large, or they would have to be playing in that first four round. I'm not saying it's impossible for the Buckeyes to pull off an upset against the Volunteers, but I think overall Tennessee has just proven that they can be just a little bit more consistent from time to time compared to Ohio State.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. I think Ohio State always manages to compete in every game that they play, but unless you're below, a certain net ranking, they're just not going to win that game. And I think Tennessee is a good enough team that, it would come down to the wire. Ohio State would make it close, but they just don't have enough good players to actually get the win. And I think Virginia takes care of business against North Dakota State. Just quickly, Ohio State could potentially have a rematch with Virginia. And I do think they could win that game if it happened. And the reason that rematch is allowed is because they just played that one time in the regular season. So there's no rules against having them meet in the second round. Wisconsin and VCU. This one could be interesting. We have VCU pulling off the upset in the Atlantic 10, getting the auto bid there. I think they've been playing really well, but I think Wisconsin just overall is the better team. They have multiple quad 1A wins. Yeah, Wisconsin's just playing great basketball as of late. They've dropped a few games that maybe they shouldn't have, particularly to Ohio State is the big one where they got blown out. But overall, when you win at Michigan, when you win at Illinois, blow out Michigan State at home, you're playing some great basketball. I think they'd take care of business and move on to the second round, which would be against Houston. Robert Morris is not going to win that one.
Yep, no notes.
All right, moving on to the second round. Duke and Texas. I think Texas is playing pretty well. Oops. But Duke is going to take care of business there. Arkansas and Kansas or Arkansas and Kansas, whichever way you want to pronounce it. This game is going to be really solid once again. Was this a tournament game last year?
I don't know if it was a tournament game last year. Actually, it might have been because I think there was a chance that they were going to have a Arkansas Kentucky game or something like that. But Arkansas, I think, beat St. John's in the round of 32. I think when St. John's was a second seed, but I think Kansas did end up getting the better of them last year, if that's what it did happen.
It was Arkansas who beat Kansas last year. It was a
Oh,
10-7 game.
okay.
It was a 10-7 game. And yeah, again, this would be a really good game. But I think I'm going to go with Kansas to get their revenge and set up a Sweet 16 matchup with Duke, a blue blood matchup right there. Indiana Gonzaga, I think Gonzaga takes care of business in that one. Indiana's been playing well. I don't think they would win that. And then Illinois beats St. Louis, and we end up with seeds 1 through 4 in the Sweet 16 in this top left region.
We love straight chalk. But now we get
Yeah,
to the chaotic division, yeah, or the chaotic region. Yippee. I don't think Iowa State would go out against NC State. I definitely think that could be an interesting game because we've seen NC State put up a good amount of points, but I think Iowa State has just been so dominant throughout this entire season.
yeah, Louisville and UNCW. I think Louisville would get the win there. Really like this Louisville team. I don't know if I've made that clear enough yet. Akron and Michigan State. I think, unfortunately, Akron's run's going to come to an end there. Michigan State has a really, really solid team. And UCLA, UConn, again, we're going to end up with not 1 through 4, but 1, 2, 3, and 5 in this region. So still pretty chalk, but there's a team I'm maybe looking at that could pull off an upset at some point here. Next up is going to be Arizona, Miami. I think we talked about Miami earlier. They're a solid team. I like Arizona a lot. They've been playing really, really well. They had the road win over Houston this past weekend. That was a great game from the Wildcats. BYU, North Carolina. I like North Carolina here, especially with Caleb Wilson back. I think this is a really, really good team. And because of the fact that they lost him, they might actually, like we're seeing here, they're down at a 4 seed. I think they're potentially a top 10 team. So maybe being a little bit of a lower seed could help them actually in this tournament, maybe sneak under the radar a little bit and get a little bit further than originally thought.
Missouri and Purdue. I don't know if this is what you were alluding to earlier, but it's not a March Madness bracket without Purdue having an uncharacteristic yet still characteristic early exit. I think Missouri is somewhat comparable to Purdue. Obviously, the Boilermakers are probably the overall better team, but I don't know. Weird things happen for Purdue in March, and I feel like if there's going to be a random team that makes a bit of a deep run, it's going to be Missouri, at least in this region. It could easily go either way. I don't know if you think I'm absolutely crazy here, but maybe I'm hating on Purdue a little bit. But I think the Tigers have had good enough highs and have competed against good teams in the SEC that I think it's potentially possible.
Yeah, that was in fact the exact game that I was looking at earlier.
We are on the
When I
same
said
wavelength.
that, yeah, when I said that there was going to be an upset later, I was thinking Missouri over Purdue. Um, and now it's my turn to try and convince you about the actual unexpected upset, which is Villanova over Florida. This Villanova team, they've played well against some solid teams. They've competed with UConn on the road. Florida, we've seen, especially it was early in the season when they had a lot of games that they dropped, but I still think that there's a potential that a team like Florida could end up dropping a game early in the tournament. And I think this would probably be a bigger upset, honestly, than Missouri over Purdue. I like Villanova here to pull off a shocker against Florida.
We can put it for now. I personally would not be putting it because I think Florida, at least right now, yeah, we have them in a two, but I think they're a 3 or 4 seed right now for most other bracketologies. I think they have a legitimate chance at going back to back. I mean, this team has been very, very dominant as of late, and I really don't know if there's very many teams out there that can stop them, but hey, a hot Villanova team that has competed against UConn and St. John's throughout the regular season, maybe they can pull it off. Again, not something I'd necessarily pick, but I've had my fair share of upsets in this one. I gotta let you have some as well.
All right, Michigan and SMU. I think this is a scrappy SMU team, but Michigan will take care of business there. They're just overall too talented. Alabama, St. John's. Bama's the lower seed here. I think they'd actually be favored, and we saw St. John's lose in the second round last year. I feel like it's kind of, at least right now, on track to be a similar trajectory for St. John's. So I'm going to go Bama here. Sets up a matchup with Michigan in the Sweet 16. Tennessee, Virginia, really like this Virginia team. I think they would move on. And then Houston over Wisconsin. Again, I really like Wisconsin. I think Houston would win that game.
Yep, no real notes. I think St. John could end up beating Bama a little bit because Bama, at times has maybe not looked at their best, but I think when it comes to the tournament, Alabama will turn it up a notch.
Yeah, we have this blue blood matchup to start off the Sweet 16, Duke and Kansas. I think it'd be a really good game, but I mean, Cam Boozer is playing unbelievably well. I think that Duke would win that game and move on to the Elite Eight. And then Gonzaga and Illinois. This one I do think would be a really close game. I really like both of these teams, but this is definitely recency bias. Illinois' loss to UCLA, I think, has got me slightly leaning in favor of Gonzaga in this game.
That's kind of interesting because I mean, it's not recency bias because it happened a little while ago, but all I can think about now with Gonzaga is that loss at the beginning of February on the road to Portland. To Portland. I I understands like Illinois is one of the top offenses in the country, and you really shouldn't lose to UCLA in that situation necessarily, but I still trust them. Like this is one of the best offensive years by a college basketball team. I think not just like in the last 10 years or whatever. I think of all time. And or at least in like the Ken Pom era, I think is what I saw. I I just I don't know. I'm lower on Gonzaga than I think a lot of people are, and it's because of that Portland loss and that earlier game against Seattle that they nearly lost to. But we can go Gonzaga here, but I think personally Illinois has got a really solid chance at making a deep run and competing in a game against like Duke in the next round if they were to get this win.
Yeah, the main thing with Gonzaga is, I mean, other than like you said, that Portland loss, which is a really bad quad three loss, their only other loss is to Michigan. They have five quad two wins, six quad one wins. They've been playing really well and consistently over the course of the season. So I feel like that is definitely something that would play into it. Iowa State and Louisville. I've said how much I really like this Louisville team, but again, I want to go Iowa State here. I think that the Cyclones have been a really, really good team. Yes, they lost at BYU, but that's not a terrible loss by any means. I think they'll bounce back over the next couple weeks. And just overall, they're a one seed for a reason. I think this Iowa State team is really good. And then Michigan State and UConn. Michigan State, they played really bad in that game that they had against Ohio State this past weekend. But I feel like just overall, this is still a really solid team. We've seen UConn cut it close in a lot of games. I think Michigan State here actually pulls off a little bit of an upset as a three seed over a two seed here and moves on to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, that one's close, but I'm willing to lean with Michigan State just because they've played so much tougher competition in the Big Ten. I mean, if you're just even looking at like the month of February, ranked top 10 matchup against Illinois, you had that game against Wisconsin, who wasn't ranked at the time but was on a really long win streak, UCLA, and then Ohio State, who are both pretty competitive. And then you're ending the year with a road trip against Purdue, road trip against Indiana, and a road trip against Michigan. They have consistently been playing very good against some of those top teams, and I'm willing to lean them for right now, even though UConn maybe has a little bit of experience on their side with some of their players, but it's going to be a very close game between those two.
Yeah, all right. Next up, Arizona and North Carolina. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it right now. I'm taking North Carolina to pull off the upset over Arizona. Especially with Caleb Wilson back, I think this team's going to be really, really solid. I hinted at it earlier saying they're going to be underrated for their seed. I think this is a bad matchup for Arizona in the Sweet 16. We've seen North Carolina be able to beat a team like Duke already this season. I think they can pull off an upset here, and it's certainly not out of the question for Arizona to lose earlier in the tournament than people think that they're going to.
I kind of agree. I think out of all the one seeds, at least that we have, Arizona's probably the one I'd expect to lose the earliest. And it's not really a knock on them. It's maybe a little bit of recency bias as well because they had those two losses in a row, granted to two very good teams, but they've started to turn it around. But like you said, I think North Carolina will be able to kind of prepare themselves even better for the tournament with the fact that Caleb Wilson isn't playing because now you're gonna have to rely on a couple more guys. And then when he comes back, you're going to have three, four, five guys that are going to be able to take over a game if they need to. So I kind of agree. I think the Tar Heels couldn't make a solid run and beat Arizona, who was for the longest time undefeated and the consensus number one team in the country.
Yeah, and this next game, Missouri and Villanova. I think this one would actually be pretty close. And call me crazy, but if the bracket played out like this, I'm taking Missouri for one more round. I think that they can get it done and get to the Elite Eight as a double digit seed. We didn't see it last year. I think we're due for one this season. Somebody's going to make a run that nobody's expecting. And the way this bracket played out, I think it makes the most sense for that to be Missouri. So far we have a one seed and three seed. One seed and three seed is two of the Elite Eight matchups, and then you have a four seed and an 11 seed. I think that pretty much sums up March Madness. That's typically how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, we need it. We need it, especially after last year. I felt like so many matchups from last year were chalk matchups. I'd love to see some real chaos this year, and I do think that with how what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it, but with how even a lot of the teams are, I do think we are in store for a lot of potential upsets this year. However, I do think Michigan is gonna handle Alabama pretty well. I think that front court combination that they have is arguably the best in college basketball right now, and their only two losses of the year was that loss to Wisconsin that started their hot streak, and then just recently losing to Duke, who is arguably the tied with them for being the best team in college basketball. I think they handle that pretty easily. Nothing really on Alabama, but we've seen some of those lows for the Crimson Tide. And then Houston, Virginia. I know you really like this Virginia team too, and Houston has struggled in their last couple games a little bit. I still would like to go with the Cougars here. I think that kind of similar to Alabama, at least for the first couple rounds. Tournament rolls around, especially with the Big 12 tournament. I think they'll start to kick it up a notch.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think Houston's the better team there, and they would get that win. Duke and Gonzaga. I mean, it feels almost rude to Gonzaga to just immediately pick Duke, but that's exactly what I'm going to do. I think that just overall they're the better team. They have the better top player in Cam Boozer. Iowa State and Michigan State. I do think this would actually be a really good game, and I'm actually going to go with the Spartans here to pull off a little bit of an upset over Iowa State. I think this Iowa State team has obviously had some really good wins, but talking about that game like against BYU where they lost on the road, they definitely could lose to a team like Michigan State. And just overall, I like the way Michigan State has been playing. I think they're going to finish out the season strong. And I think at this point in the season, they'll be very comparable to Iowa State and can get that win.
Yeah, it'll be a close one, but I think more of it, at least in recent memory, Iowa State's struggles, at least with the tournament, has been that they have had some injuries that they've dealt with, and if they are able to stay healthy, I might pick them in this matchup. But I do think you have Tom Izzo as your head coach for the Spartans. He's done this time and time again. I think if they get hot at the right time, they should be able to make a deep run.
Yeah, now for this next matchup, I think it's pretty clear that Missouri's run is going to come to an end, but they had a good time making it to the Elite Eight. And then Michigan and Houston. I mean, Michigan they've looked so good all season long, but I feel like if anybody's going to be able to slow them down, it's this Houston team. They've played so well over the course of the season. Like Connor said, not as well as of late, but I think they're going to be able to turn it up. They might even be a one seed by this time. And I do think that Houston would get that win and move on to the Final Four.
Yeah, it'd be really, really close. And I do think if Michigan ended up winning that game, I'd expect, at least with how the bracket played out for us, I'd expect a rematch between the Blue Devils and the Wolverines. But if no team can end up just straight up beating Michigan, I think Houston would be the one team that could slow them down and get them into another kind of close game that maybe they end up sneaking out the win in. And I mean, we've seen Houston in this situation a lot of times in the last couple of years in the tournament, and they just haven't been able to like win the entire thing. It again, it's a close one. I'd be fine with picking Michigan as well, but I do think that Houston definitely has everything that they need that they can use to end up beating the Wolverines. Essentially, what I'm saying, close game, could easily go either way. I'm fine with picking Houston for right now.
Yeah, and then honestly, I think both of these next matchups are pretty straightforward. I think Duke beats Michigan State. I guess this one's not as straightforward. Because if North Carolina had the opportunity to play Houston, to go play Duke for a national title, I think they would play absolutely out of their minds. My heart wants me to pick North Carolina, but I think that this is a game that would end up going to Houston, just overall the more consistent and better team.
Yeah, it'd be really close. Both teams led by freshman guards. And again, like you said, I think Houston's just been here a little bit more, at least recently, and they should be able to get it. But North Carolina, if they are given that opportunity, I would not put it past them to just blow out any team in their way to go face off against their arch rivals in the national championship game, because the stakes for that would be j just unbelievable.
Yeah, and then as far as this national championship goes, it's the same old story. It's Duke and Houston. Houston makes it to the national championship. They play a team that's better than them, and Duke ends up winning the national championship once again for me.
Yeah, I agree. I again, maybe it's a little bit of the recency bias, but Houston struggled in their past couple of games. Duke just beat Michigan, who I would argue is probably the best team, at least top to bottom on paper, as of right now. I think it's pretty self-explanatory from there then. It's so close. It's gonna be a great tournament because there's so many good teams at the top, but also just spread out throughout the entire bracket. I could see a ton of these games going any which way, but I do think at the end of the day, Duke has just proven throughout the course of this season that they have what it takes to just deal with and beat any team that comes in their way. So Duke is our national champion for right now in this bracketology. We will update these over time as the last couple games of the regular season start to finish up and as we get into the conference tournaments. But thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more of our videos, and we will see you in the next one.